hadn't been back to Lakewood in almost 5 years. The town hadn't changed much. Same tree-lined streets, same sun-faded signs on Main Street. Even the smell, a mix of pine, wet pavement, and barbecue from the corner smokehouse, hit me the moment I rolled the window down. It was the kind of place that didn't try to be anything else. And I think that's what I loved most about it. I came back for my cousin Mason's engagement party. A backyard get-together with cheap beer, loud laughter, and way too much food. My mom had begged me to fly in for it, said it was time to see everyone again, which I translated as, she missed me more than she admitted. The backyard was already filling up when I arrived. I spotted a few familiar faces right away. Uncles in baseball caps, cousins with new tattoos, people I hadn't spoken to in years waving like we'd talked yesterday. It was warm, the kind of late summer heat that clings to your skin, and someone had set up fairy lights in the trees. Mason, always the showman, was already 2 beers deep and trying to sing along with a Bluetooth speaker that kept cutting in and out. I grabbed a drink, hugged my mom, and made the rounds. Everything felt easy, familiar. I wasn't expecting anything else. And then I saw her. At first, I didn't recognize her. She was standing near the deck steps, laughing at something Mason's fiancé said. She held a glass of white wine, her other hand tucked into the back pocket of her jeans. Her hair was darker than I remembered, longer too, and curled naturally around her shoulders. She wore a plain sleeveless top and looked effortlessly elegant, comfortable in a way no one else there was. When she turned, her eyes caught mine, and I froze, because I did know her. Samantha Blake. She used to be my mom's best friend. I'd known her most of my life. She used to babysit me when I was little. Then, when I hit my teens, she stopped coming around as much. Probably because I couldn't stop looking at her back then. She was only about 15 years older than me, young for my mom's circle, and had always carried herself with that impossible mix of kindness and quiet strength. As a kid, I just thought she was pretty. As I got older, it became harder not to stare. She was the first woman I remember giving me that feeling, that ache I didn't understand yet. And now, standing in front of me, smiling in that same soft, curious way, she looked like no time had passed at all. Except I wasn't 16 anymore. She walked over slowly, her heels tapping lightly on the wooden deck. "Well, look at you," she said, tilting her head. "When did you get so grown up?" I laughed awkwardly. "A few years ago, I think. Give or take." She smiled again, a deeper, knowing smile, and took a sip of her wine. "I almost didn't recognize you," she said. "You were, what, 18 the last time I saw you?" "Probably. I think it was my mom's birthday. You brought that giant chocolate cake." "Oh wow. I haven't made that cake in years." "You should. It was amazing." Her eyes stayed on mine a second longer than expected. Not in a flirty way, just present, focused. She was always like that, fully in the moment when she spoke to someone. It used to throw me off. Still did. She leaned in slightly. "You always were sweet." Before I could say anything else, Mason called me over for a game of cornhole. I excused myself, half relieved, half regretful. But as I walked away, I could still feel her eyes on me, and I couldn't shake the warmth in my chest. The night dragged in the best way. After dinner, people settled into little groups around the yard. I caught up with a few old friends, played bartender for a bit, and tried to ignore how often my eyes wandered back to her. She floated through the party like she belonged everywhere. Everyone seemed to love her, even the younger cousins who barely remembered her. She laughed at the right moments, told stories, even helped my aunt carry trays back to the kitchen. And every so often our eyes would meet. A glance here, a half smile there. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it. Later, as people started to leave, I stepped inside to grab a water bottle. The kitchen was quiet, lights dimmed. I thought I was alone until I turned the corner. She was there, leaning against the counter, phone in hand. "Oh," I said, stopping short. She looked up and smiled. "Thirsty?" "Yeah." "Needed a break from the crowd?" She nodded. "Me too." Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just heavy, charged. She stepped away from the counter, walked past me toward the fridge, and opened it. "There should be bottled water in here somewhere," she mumbled, bending slightly. I stared at the floor, anywhere but at her. She found the bottles, grabbed two, and handed one to me. "Thanks." We stood there, sipping in the silence, just a few feet apart. Then she said it quietly, almost like a thought that slipped out. "You've grown up so much." The way she said it, it wasn't casual. It wasn't like something you'd say to your friend's son out of politeness. She looked at me like she was seeing me again for the first time. And then, slowly, she took a step closer. Just one. But everything changed in that step. My heart pounded. My fingers tightened on the plastic bottle. The air felt suddenly too warm, too still. She didn't touch me, didn't say another word, just stood there, looking. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the kid at the family party. I felt like something else, something more. I didn't sleep well that night. Even after the party faded and I drove back to the small guest house my mom had set me up in, my mind wouldn't settle. I replayed it over and over, her voice, low and deliberate. "You've grown up so much," followed by that single quiet step forward. She hadn't meant it as a joke. It wasn't playful or patronizing. Felt weighted, like she had been thinking it for longer than she cared to admit. I tossed and turned for hours, staring at the ceiling, telling myself not to overanalyze. Maybe she had one too many glasses of wine. Maybe I was imagining the look in her eyes. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But I couldn't convince myself. The next morning, I woke up groggy, ran a hand through my hair, and checked my phone out of habit. A few texts. One from Mason thanking everyone for coming. A random meme from a college friend. And one message I didn't expect. "Samantha Blake. It was really good seeing you last night. You've turned into someone I'd like to know again. Coffee sometime?" I stared at the screen. No emojis. No lol. Just direct. Honest. And exactly what I'd been hoping for, without admitting it to myself. I typed back quickly, then erased it. Tried again. Erased that too. Finally, I settled on, "I'd like that. Name the place and time." She responded within a minute. "There's a cafe on Pine Street, across from the bookstore." Noon. It was already 10:30. I barely had time to shower and find something halfway decent to wear. The cafe was quiet, tucked between a used bookstore and a closed-down florist shop. It had that small-town charm, hand-painted signs, chalkboard menus, plants in mismatched pots by the windows. I got there early, sat at a two-person table in the corner, facing the door. When she walked in, it was like something out of a scene I didn't know I'd been waiting to live. She wore a loose beige cardigan over a simple black tank top, jeans, and flat sandals. Her hair was pulled back in a soft bun, a few strands framing her face. No makeup that I could see, and she looked stunning. Not in a flashy way, in the way where everything about her said she didn't need to try. She just was. She spotted me, smiled, and made her way over. "Hey," I said, standing halfway, unsure if I should go in for a hug or not. She solved that for me, stepping in and wrapping her arms around me gently. It wasn't a long hug, but it wasn't rushed either. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said as we sat down. "I wasn't sure you were serious." She laughed. "Fair." We ordered coffees, black for her, iced with a shot of hazelnut for me, and fell into conversation more easily than I expected. First, we talked about the party, Mason and his never-ending confidence, my mom's obsession with photo albums, her job. She worked part-time now as a private tutor, mostly high school English. "I got burned out teaching full-time," she admitted. "Too much politics, too little actual teaching." "Still sounds like you're doing what you love." "I am," she said, and then added, "It's just quieter now, and sometimes a little too quiet." She looked at me when she said that, and for a brief second, I forgot where I was. "You were always one of the good ones, you know?" she said suddenly. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "In school. You actually cared, asked questions, stayed after class for help, even when you didn't really need it." "I like talking to you," I said before thinking. Then softer, "You made it easy." Something shifted again. She smiled, but there was something behind it this time. A trace of memory. A question she hadn't asked yet. "I used to wonder," she said, "what you'd be like when you got older." I swallowed. She sipped her coffee. Her fingers moved slowly along the rim of the mug. "I used to feel guilty for even thinking that," she added, barely above a whisper. "You were 17, just a kid. And now?" I asked quieter than I meant to. Her eyes met mine. They didn't waver. "Now you're not." The air between us tightened, like a wire pulled just before it snaps. And then she smiled again and leaned back in her chair, letting the moment settle. "You still live out of town?" she asked. "For now. I work remote. Could be anywhere, really. Must be nice." "Depends," I said. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just floating. No anchor." Her eyes softened. "Maybe you haven't found the right place to land." Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. The noise of the cafe faded into the background. Distant clinks of spoons. The hiss of the espresso machine. Faint jazz on the speakers. When she stood to leave, I did too. "Walk me to my car?" she asked. "Of course." We strolled side by side down the sidewalk. The sun was warm but not harsh, and a breeze tugged gently at her cardigan. I watched the way she moved, confident but not rushed, comfortable in her skin. At her car, she paused. "I wasn't expecting this," she said. "Me neither." She opened her door but didn't get in. Instead, she turned to me, eyes scanning my face like she was trying to read something I wasn't saying. Then she leaned in, not for a kiss, but just close enough for her voice to drop again into that whisper. "You've grown up so much." And for the second time, she took a step closer. Not dramatic, not bold, just intentional. I didn't move away, and this time, neither of us pretended we didn't feel it. After that second encounter, everything felt different. I went back to the guest house in a daze. My heart had slowed down, but my thoughts hadn't. They were spinning, colliding, reshaping the way I remembered her, the way I remembered myself around her. I kept replaying that moment beside her car. The way she stepped closer, how her voice wrapped itself around those words. "You've grown up so much." This wasn't just nostalgia. It wasn't a crush reborn. It was something else. something I couldn't quite define yet, but I could feel it all the way down. That night, I didn't even turn on the TV. I lay on the guest house couch, staring at the ceiling, letting her face fill the silence. Her voice, her eyes, the warmth of her presence, they didn't leave me. And then she texted again. "Samantha, I forgot to ask, you still like red wine?" I blinked at the screen, grinning before I could stop myself. "Me? Always. Why?" "Samantha, come by tomorrow night. I still owe you chocolate cake. Remember?" I stared at her message for a long moment, heart thudding louder than before. Me? What time? The next day moved at a crawl. I tried to work on my laptop, tried to answer emails, even pretended to read a book, but my brain refused to stay focused. Every few minutes, I checked the time. At 7 o'clock sharp, I pulled into her driveway. Her house sat quietly near the edge of town, nestled between tall trees and a low white fence. The porch light was on. The windows glowed a soft gold. I could smell something sweet in the air before I even reached the door. I knocked once, but the door opened before my hand dropped. There she stood, barefoot, wearing a soft black dress that ended just above her knees. Her hair was loose again, slightly wavy. She didn't say anything, just smiled and stepped aside to let me in. "Smells amazing," I said, stepping inside. "Just a little nostalgia," she said with a grin. "Chocolate cake. Thought I'd keep my promises." The house was cozy, not big, not flashy, just warm, lived in. There were books on nearly every surface, a candle flickering in the hallway, soft jazz humming from a speaker somewhere out of view. "Wine?" she offered. "Yes, please." She poured 2 glasses in the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, watching her move, graceful, unhurried, like every step had meaning. "You always made the best cake," I said. "I remember," she replied. "You and Mason once ate half of it before dinner." Guilty. She handed me a glass and clinked hers against mine. "To returning," she said. "To finding something you didn't expect to." We drank. She set her glass down and leaned against the counter across from me, folding her arms lightly. Her eyes were steady, calm, but there was something stirring behind them. "You know," she began, "I thought it would feel strange, seeing you again." "Does it?" She looked at me a long time. "No, it feels like something that should have happened sooner." I felt the words like gravity pulling us closer. "I used to wonder," I said slowly, "if you knew how I looked at you back then." "I knew," she whispered. That admission hung between us like electricity. I stared at her, speechless for a beat. "And you never said anything," I finally said. "You were a teenager," she said. "A smart, sweet, curious boy who didn't hide his eyes when I walked into the room. I noticed. I wasn't blind. But I couldn't." She trailed off. I nodded. "I get it." She stepped closer, closing the space between us to just a few feet. "But you're not that boy anymore," she said. We stood there, facing each other, glasses forgotten on the counter. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "You're not just grown up," she added. "You're different, but familiar too, like a song I used to love and forgot I knew the lyrics to." I didn't know what to say to that. I just watched her. I didn't need to speak. I think she already knew what I felt, had known from the moment our eyes met at the party. "Come sit," she said, turning away softly. We moved into the living room. She sat on one end of the couch, tucking her legs up, and I sat beside her a respectful distance away. She passed me a plate with a thick slice of chocolate cake, and for a few minutes we let the silence settle while we ate. "Still amazing," I said with my mouth full. She laughed, a real open laugh, and leaned her head back against the couch cushion. "You haven't changed," she said. "I think I have." She turned her head and looked at me. Her expression was softer now, maybe even a little sad. "No," she said gently. "You've grown. That's different." I set my plate down on the coffee table, wiped my hands on the napkin, and turned to face her more fully. "Why did you invite me here?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. She traced her finger along the rim of her wine glass, then finally looked up. "Because I wanted to see you again without everyone watching." "Why?" She exhaled slowly. "Because last night, when I saw your face, when I heard your voice, I remembered how it felt to be around someone who sees me, not for being someone's friend, not a teacher, not a polite 'how have you been' at a grocery store, just me. You've always been more than that to me." She blinked. Her lip trembled for just a second. Then she moved closer. Her hand reached out slowly, resting on mine. "I'm not trying to complicate your life," she whispered. "I just don't want to ignore this." "I don't either." Her hand tightened on mine. We sat like that, fingers entwined, breaths slowing together. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But I knew we would, because she had stopped seeing me as a boy, and I had started seeing her as more than a memory. We were both stepping into something unknown, carefully, quietly, but without turning away. After that night, nothing between us was left untouched. We didn't rush. There were no grand declarations, no wild moves, just a quiet shift in how we looked at each other, in how we spoke. It was as if something long dormant had finally been acknowledged, not created, just uncovered. The following days passed with a strange sense of normalcy. I visited my mom, caught up with relatives, even helped Mason haul furniture for his new place. On the outside, everything seemed the same, but underneath I was charged, waiting, and she was never far from my mind. Samantha didn't text me every day, but when she did, her words always felt like they came mid-thought, like a continuation of a conversation we hadn't finished. "You always noticed more than people realized. There's something about you that unsettles me in a good way. Do you remember when I used to help you with your essays? I always knew you were meant to write something deeper." Each message came late, after 10 or 11 p.m. I never asked why. I just responded, not with flirty emojis or games, but with equal honesty. And then, after 3 days of quiet, she sent, "I could use some help around the house. Nothing big, just some things I've put off. Want to come by tomorrow afternoon?" I replied instantly. It was warm again when I pulled into her driveway. The sun filtered through the trees, the wind gentle enough to stir the wind chimes hanging above her porch. She greeted me at the door in jeans and a gray tank top, hair tied loosely, bare feet on the wooden floor. "Hope you're ready to lift heavy things," she teased. "Bring it on." We spent the next hour rearranging some bookshelves in her den, organizing bins in the garage, and fixing a kitchen cabinet door that had come loose. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt good, like something familiar, comfortable. It gave us a reason to laugh, to move around each other, to trade glances without having to explain anything. At one point, while I was drilling in a new hinge on the cabinet, I caught her staring, not in a nostalgic way, in a present, open, quietly vulnerable way. "What?" I asked. She smiled, then looked down. "You're really here," she said. I am. Her voice lowered. I keep expecting to feel guilty. I stopped what I was doing and set the drill down. Do you? No, not really. But I'm afraid I should. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over to her, standing just a foot away. There's nothing wrong about this, I said softly. We're not the people we used to be. Her eyes searched mine. I know. That's what scares me. How easy this feels. We stood in the kitchen for a moment, the distance between us taut and quiet. Then I did something I'd been holding back from. I reached up and brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned in slightly, just enough for her shoulder to graze my chest. And then, softly, almost like a question, she rested her hand on my chest. My heart thudded under her palm. You're not a boy anymore, she whispered. And I'm tired of pretending I don't see that. That was the moment. Not a dramatic one. Not loud. But everything that followed had already begun in that touch. I brought my hand to her waist, gently, and she didn't stop me. She looked up into my eyes, lips parted. Not with anticipation, but with permission. And when we finally kissed, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't fireworks. It was like two stories folding into each other. Slowly, fully, quietly rewriting what they thought they were. Later, we sat on her back porch as dusk fell over the trees. She wore a light sweater, curled into the chair beside mine, a blanket over her legs. We didn't talk much. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full. At one point, she said, I've had people chase after me, flatter me, but none of them made me feel like I was being seen. Not like this. I think I've been seeing you for years, I said, even when I didn't understand what it meant. She reached over and took my hand in hers, resting it in her lap. You don't scare me, she said, but how easy this feels. That does. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because deep down I felt the same. It wasn't that I feared what would happen next. I feared that once we crossed this line, once we stepped fully into whatever this was, there would be no going back. And that maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to. It started raining around 10:30. Not a storm, just a steady, warm summer rain tapping gently against the windows. We were still on the back porch, our glasses now empty, the air wrapped in quiet tension that neither of us had dared name yet. I should probably get going, I said, my voice low, not moving at all. Samantha didn't answer at first. She looked at me, then at the rain, then back at me. She pulled the blanket tighter around her knees and finally said, Or, you could stay a little longer. I turned toward her. Are you sure? She nodded, her gaze steady. I don't want this to feel like something that ends at the door. That sentence landed deep. We went inside. The house felt warmer now, softer. Maybe because of the rain, or maybe because everything between us had quietly shifted. I followed her to the living room, and she lit a single lamp in the corner. Dim, golden light spilled across the walls. You okay with staying? She asked again. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She offered a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Not because she wasn't happy, but because something in her was trembling too. We sat on the couch, closer this time. The silence wasn't filled with nervousness, but with awareness. Every movement was slower, every glance heavier. I used to wonder, she said quietly, what it would feel like if we had met under different circumstances, if we were the same age, if the timing wasn't so off. I turned to her. You ever think maybe the timing's finally right? She exhaled, soft and deliberate. That's what scares me. And then she leaned in. Our lips met again, slower this time, deeper. There was no rush, no grabbing. Just wait. History. Want. I pulled her gently into my arms. She let me. We didn't speak. Words would have broken it. Her hand moved over my chest, her fingers trailing down my arm, and I shivered. Not from the touch, but from the gravity of it all. I could feel how long she'd been holding this back. Not just tonight, for years. When she pulled back just slightly, her forehead resting against mine, she whispered, "I always knew you'd come back different. I just didn't expect you'd make me feel like this again." I ran my fingers along the side of her face. "Like what?" "Wanted," she said, "but also safe. Like I can be soft again." Something in my chest cracked open. Not lust, not pride, something tender, fierce. We kissed again, and this time she didn't stop. Her hands moved to my shirt, lifting it slowly. I helped her wordlessly. She leaned in, pressing her cheek against my bare shoulder, and stayed like that for a few breaths. And when she stood, she didn't speak, just took my hand and led me through the hallway to her bedroom. The rain kept tapping against the windows as we undressed slowly, not in a feverish rush, but like we were reading a language only we knew. She paused at one point and looked at me fully, with the kind of openness that's hard to earn and even harder to hold. "I've never done anything like this," she whispered. "Not like this." "I know," I said. "Me neither." We lay together beneath the sheets, our bodies warm from touch and trust. We didn't speak much afterward, but her head rested on my chest, her fingers tracing circles on my skin. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, then stopped altogether. She fell asleep curled against me. I stayed awake a little longer, staring at the ceiling, wondering how this would change us. Wondering if there was even a version of us that could exist beyond this town, beyond this night. But mostly, I was just grateful it had finally happened. Not because of desire, but because someone I had once only admired from across a classroom now lay beside me. Not as an unreachable dream, but as someone who saw me as a man. The next morning, sunlight pushed gently through the curtains, brushing over the bed like a whisper. I opened my eyes slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to disturb the stillness. Samantha was still sleeping beside me, her face turned toward the window, hair falling softly across her cheek. One of her hands rested against my chest, her breathing even and quiet. For a moment I just watched her. This woman, who used to be a name on a roll sheet, an untouchable figure at the front of a classroom, now slept beside me, vulnerable and unguarded. Not as a fantasy, not as a memory, but as something real. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Eventually, she stirred, her eyelashes fluttering as she shifted against the pillow. "Morning," I said softly. Her eyes opened slowly, and when they met mine, they didn't dart away or cloud with regret. They just softened. "Hey," she whispered. We lay like that for a few more minutes, neither of us rushing the morning. No phones, no small talk, just warmth and weight and something unspoken that didn't need to be translated. But eventually, reality started creeping in. "What happens now?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, then turned to face me. "I've been wondering the same thing. We could pretend it didn't happen," I said quietly, though the words tasted wrong the moment I said them. Her eyes narrowed just a little. "Is that what you want?" No, I sat up, mirroring her. Not even close. She let out a breath, not of relief, but of tension she'd been holding on to. Then maybe, she said, we don't figure it all out right away. Maybe we just keep going. Carefully. Honestly. I can do honest. Good, she said, giving me a half smile. Because I'm too old for games. I laughed, and she swatted my arm. I didn't mean it like that. No, I get it, I said, still smiling. You want something real. She looked at me, not like a teacher, not like a woman guarding herself, but like someone trying to believe this could work. You'd go back to your life, your city, your freedom, and I'd still be here. I don't have to, I said. I told you I work remote. I can be anywhere. She looked down, then back up at me. Anywhere. I came back for a reason, Sam. That reason was Mason's party. No, I said. That's just how the door opened. You were the reason I walked through it. Her eyes welled slightly, but she blinked the tears away before they could fall. I need time, she admitted. This is a lot. I'm not going anywhere, I promised, unless you want me to. I don't, she said softly. I really don't. We didn't define anything that day. We didn't label it. We didn't map out our future like a neat itinerary. But we spent the rest of the day together, drinking coffee on her porch, taking a walk through the quiet streets, sharing memories and laughter and long silences that weren't uncomfortable anymore. And when I left that evening, she kissed me at the door, not urgently, not possessively, just like someone who finally allowed herself to want again. Weeks passed. I stayed in town longer than I planned, rented a short-term place, spent my days working, my evenings with her. We didn't announce anything, didn't owe anyone explanations. We just lived. One night, over dinner, I told her, you know, I used to write stories in your class, fictional stuff, but there was always one character I couldn't stop writing. She tilted her head. Let me guess. A mysterious older woman with a sharp tongue and a warm heart? I grinned. She never had a name, but I think she looked a lot like you. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Flattery will get you nowhere, mister. I stood and walked behind her, kissed her temple. It already got me somewhere. And she laughed, really laughed. That sound meant everything. So no, this wasn't some fairy tale. There were doubts, complications. The difference in age didn't disappear overnight. The history, student and teacher, lingered in the background, an old shadow. But we learned to live beyond that story. We wrote a new one kiss, one quiet night, one whispered truth at a time. And now, when I look at her, I don't see the woman who used to stand at the front of my high school class. I see her, strong, complex, beautiful in every way that matters. And I know she sees me too, not as a boy, not as a mistake, but as a man who chose her and never looked back.